The first time my daughter cried over that room, she was 5 years old. It's too big for me, Lily whispered as she stood in the middle of the painted bedroom, clutching her stuffed rabbit against her chest. The room had once belonged to me when I was a child. My grandfather built the house himself nearly 40 years earlier, and he used to joke that the biggest room on the second floor belonged to the strongest girl in the family. When he passed it down to me, I gave the room to Lily because I wanted her to feel safe after losing her father. I never imagined my own family would try to take it away from her. 2 years after my husband Daniel died in a highway accident, I was still learning how to breathe without feeling shattered. Some days I managed well enough. Other days I sat in the laundry room late at night so Lily wouldn't hear me cry. But through all of it, that house became our shelter. Then my family moved in. It started with my parents. My father's retirement investments collapsed after a bad business deal, and they needed a temporary place to stay. I said yes immediately. 3 months later, my younger brother Ethan and his wife Vanessa arrived after getting evicted from their apartment. Temporary slowly became permanent. At first, I tried convincing myself we were helping each other heal. The house was large enough. Grandpa had built 6 bedrooms, wide hallways, and a giant kitchen that always smelled faintly like cedar and cinnamon. But little by little the atmosphere changed. Vanessa criticized everything. Lily is spoiled, she'd say while staring at the bedroom. A 7-year-old doesn't need that much space. She's still sleeping with stuffed animals, Ethan added once with a laugh. Meanwhile, my wife's pregnant and stuck in the guest room. I ignored the comments for months. Lily heard them too. One evening while I tucked her into bed, she asked quietly, "Mummy, do Aunt Vanessa and Uncle Ethan hate me?" The question hit me like a knife. "No, sweetheart," I lied gently. "Adults just get stressed sometimes." But even as I said it, I knew something ugly was growing inside the house. 3 weeks later, my mother announced we needed a family meeting. I found everyone sitting around the dining table after dinner. My father sat at the head like he was conducting a business conference. Vanessa rubbed her pregnant belly dramatically, while Ethan leaned back in his chair scrolling through his phone. Lily sat beside me coloring silently. My mother folded her hands. We need to discuss the room situation. I already felt my stomach tightening. What room situation? I asked carefully. Vanessa exchanged a glance with Ethan before speaking. Well, with the baby coming, we need more space. I blinked slowly. Okay. My father cleared his throat. Your daughter's room is the largest upstairs. I stared at him, unable to believe where this was going. No, I said immediately. The room went silent. You didn't even hear the proposal. My mother snapped. I heard enough. Vanessa sighed loudly. Claire, be reasonable. Lily is just one child. We're starting a family. I looked at her in disbelief. Lily is my family. Ethan finally put his phone down. Nobody's trying to hurt her. She can move into the storage room upstairs. We'll renovate it. The storage room, I repeated. It barely had a window. It's temporary. My father added. Something inside me cracked. You want my 7. Your old daughter's sleeping in a storage room so 2 grown adults can have a larger nursery. Vanessa crossed her arms. You make it sound horrible, because it is horrible. Then my mother said the sentence I will never forget. A baby matters more than a child who already has a room. Lily stopped coloring. I looked down and saw tears forming in her eyes. Mommy, she whispered. Rage exploded inside my chest. She is sitting right here, I said sharply. My father raised his hand. Enough emotion. We decided to vote fairly. I laughed once in complete disbelief. Vote yes, he said firmly. Majority decides. One by one, they raised their hands. My mother, my father. Ethan, Vanessa, 4 votes against me and my little girl. Lily grabbed my sleeve tightly. Mommy, I don't want my room taken away. The silence afterward felt poisonous. Then Vanessa smiled softly like she'd already won. See, democracy. That word nearly made me sick. I slowly stood from the table and picked up Lily into my arms. Nobody stopped me as I walked upstairs. Nobody apologized. Nobody cared that a little girl was crying against my shoulder because the people she trusted had just decided she mattered less than an unborn baby. As I carried Lily back into her lavender bedroom, I looked around the walls my grandfather once painted with me as a teenager. For the first time in my life, my family made me feel like a stranger inside my own home. And deep down, although I didn't know it yet, they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. After the vote, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like enemy territory. The next morning, nobody mentioned what had happened at the dinner table. My mother hummed while making coffee, as if she hadn't just helped evict her own granddaughter from her bedroom. Ethan lounged on the couch watching television. Vanessa spent half an hour online shopping for baby furniture she clearly expected to place inside Lily's room. Only Lily seemed changed. She stayed unusually quiet before school, staring down at her cereal instead of chatting about cartoons or spelling tests. When I helped tie her shoes, she suddenly asked, "If they take my room, will they take my bunny too?" My chest tightened painfully. "No one is taking anything from you," I promised, but at that moment I wasn't fully sure how true that was. Because somehow, inside that house, I had become outnumbered. The following weeks only got worse. Vanessa started referring to Lily's bedroom as the nursery. "Oh, the sunlight in that room is perfect for a baby," she'd say loudly during breakfast. Ethan even measured the walls one afternoon while Lily stood frozen in the hallway watching him. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "Relax, we're planning ahead." Planning ahead inside my house. One evening I returned from work and nearly exploded when I found boxes piled outside Lily's bedroom door. "What is this?" I demanded. Vanessa glanced up from the couch. "We're helping you start the transition early." "The transition," I repeated. "For Lily's new room upstairs." I walked directly to the boxes and shoved them aside so hard one nearly tipped over. "There will be no transition." Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. "God, Claire, everything becomes a fight with you." I almost laughed at the insanity of that statement. My daughter was being pushed out of her room, and somehow I was the problem. That night, Lily cried herself to sleep. Afterward, I sat alone downstairs in my grandfather's old study, trying desperately not to fall apart. The room still smelled faintly of old books and cedarwood polish. Most of Grandpa's belongings remained untouched since his death 2 years earlier. I opened one of the desk drawers searching for headache medicine. Instead, I found a thick brown envelope. My name was written across the front in my grandfather's handwriting. "Claire," my heart skipped. I slowly opened it and pulled out several legal documents, property records, and a folded letter. The first page immediately caught my attention. Property ownership transfer. I frowned in confusion and kept reading. Then I froze. According to the documents, my grandfather hadn't divided the house equally among the family like everyone believed. He had left the entire estate solely to me, every bedroom, every wall, every inch of land, mine. My hands literally trembled as I reread the papers 3 times. There had to be some mistake, but the signatures were real, the notarization was official, and attached behind everything was Grandpa's handwritten letter. "Claire, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I pray this home still protects you the way I always tried to. I know your parents will assume the house belongs to the family equally. I chose not to tell them otherwise while I was alive because I wanted peace in my final years. But this house is yours. You were the only one who cared for me when I became sick. You were the only one who visited without asking for money or favors. I built this home for someone with kindness in their heart, and that person is you. Protect your daughter here. Do not let anyone make you feel small inside these walls. Love always, Grandpa." Tears blurred my vision before I even finished reading. For months, I had allowed these people to treat me like an unwanted guest. Meanwhile, I was the actual owner the entire time. A strange calm slowly settled over me, then anger followed. Not loud anger, cold anger, the dangerous kind. Suddenly, every cruel comment replayed in my head. A baby matters more. She's spoiled. Majority decides. I looked upstairs toward Lily's room and realized something heartbreaking. None of them had ever once asked what I wanted because they never respected me enough to care. They assumed I was weak, easy to control, still grieving, but grief changes people. Sometimes it softens them, sometimes it sharpens them into steel. The next morning I acted normal. I made breakfast, packed Lily's lunch, smiled politely while Vanessa described paint colors for the nursery. Inside, I knew something they didn't. Every arrogant plan they made was built on a lie, and I decided not to reveal the truth yet. No, I wanted to see exactly how far they were willing to go. So I stayed quiet while Ethan discussed renovations. I stayed silent when my mother suggested donating Lily's furniture. And when my father announced another family discussion for the following weekend, I simply nodded calmly. Because for the first time in months, I finally understood something important. They thought they were voting me out of the house. But legally, emotionally, and morally, they were the ones living on borrowed time. By the time the second family meeting arrived, my relatives had completely stopped pretending the house belonged to all of us equally. In their minds, Lily's room was already gone. Vanessa had ordered baby wallpaper samples and spread them across the kitchen counter like some kind of victory display. Ethan spent his afternoons watching renovation videos online while complaining about space limitations. My mother began referring to the storage room upstairs as Lily's cute little nook. Every word made my blood boil, but I stayed calm. That was the part they didn't understand. Silence does not always mean weakness. Sometimes it means someone is waiting for the perfect moment. Saturday evening arrived with heavy rain tapping against the windows. My father insisted everyone gather in the dining room after dinner, the same room where they'd voted against my daughter weeks earlier. Lily sat quietly beside me again, hugging her stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. I noticed she no longer smiled much around the family. That hurt more than anything. My father folded his hands seriously. We need to finalize the room arrangements tonight. There it was. Finalized like my child was a piece of furniture being relocated. Vanessa smiled smugly from across the table. The baby will be here soon. We can't keep delaying this. Ethan nodded. I already talked to a contractor about opening the wall between Lily's room and the guest room. I stared at him slowly. You talked to a contractor? Yeah. He replied casually, we'll need extra closet space. Extra closet space. Inside my house, the arrogance almost impressed me. My mother leaned toward me impatiently. Claire, dragging this out is unfair to everyone. Unfair, I repeated quietly. Yes, she snapped, you're acting emotionally instead of logically. I looked down at Lily. She kept her eyes lowered toward the table. A 7. Your old child already trying to disappear so adults wouldn't attack her again. That was the moment something hardened permanently inside me. I reached into my bag calmly. Before we continue, I said softly, I have a question. Nobody answered. I looked directly at each of them. Do you truly believe Lily deserves less than the rest of you? Vanessa sighed dramatically. Here we go again. No, I continued firmly. Answer honestly. Ethan shrugged first. Look, she's a kid. She doesn't need the biggest room. She'll survive. My mother added coldly. My father nodded in agreement. Sacrifice is part of family. Then Vanessa delivered the final blow. A newborn baby simply matters more right now. The room fell silent. I slowly nodded once. Thank you, I whispered. Then I placed the brown envelope from my grandfather onto the table. Nobody reacted at first. What's this? Ethan asked. Read it. My father frowned and pulled out the documents. I watched his confident expression slowly collapse line by line. His face lost color. What? He whispered. My mother grabbed the papers next, scanning them rapidly. No, this can't be right. Oh, it's right, I said calmly. Vanessa suddenly sat upright. What's going on? I leaned back in my chair for the first time in weeks, feeling completely steady. My grandfather left this house to one person. The silence became suffocating. Ethan looked confused. Okay, who? I met his eyes directly. Me. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then came the panic. That's impossible. My mother snapped immediately. It's legally notarized, I replied. My father flipped through the pages frantically. He never told us this, he told me, I said quietly. In a letter, Vanessa's face turned pale. Wait, you mean this entire house belongs to you? Yes, the bedrooms too, Ethan asked weakly. I almost laughed, especially the bedrooms. For the first time since Daniel died, I felt completely awake. Every cruel comment, every insult, every attempt to push my daughter aside, all of it suddenly collapsed around them. My mother's voice shook with anger. You hid this from us. I stared at her in disbelief. You voted to remove my child from her bedroom. That's different. No, I interrupted sharply. It isn't. My father tried changing tactics instantly. Claire, we're family. Let's not make this ugly. Ugly. Interesting word from the man who watched his granddaughter cry without remorse. Vanessa suddenly softened her tone. We didn't know, okay, we thought. You thought you could control me, I said calmly. Nobody denied it. Lily looked up at me with wide eyes. Mommy, this means I keep my room. I pulled her gently onto my lap. Yes, sweetheart. She wrapped her arms around my neck tightly, and I felt her tiny body shaking with relief. That alone made every second worth it. Then I looked back at the 4 adults sitting across from me. The same people who believed majority rules, only now the numbers no longer mattered, because ownership mattered. Respect mattered, and they had shown neither. I stood slowly while holding Lily's hand. You wanted a final decision tonight, I said. My voice stayed calm, ice calm, so here it is. They watched me silently. You have 30 days to move out of my house. Nobody slept much after that night. The house that once echoed with smug confidence became painfully quiet. Doors stayed closed. Conversations stopped whenever I entered a room. The same people who had spent weeks ordering me around now avoided eye contact like frightened strangers. But the silence didn't last long. The next morning, my mother cornered me in the kitchen while I packed Lily's school lunch. You're seriously throwing your own parents out? She demanded. I calmly zipped Lily's backpack. You voted against your own granddaughter. Her face tightened instantly. That's not what happened, really, I asked quietly, because Lily cried herself to sleep for 2 weeks. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. For once, guilt had finally reached her. Unfortunately, it came far too late. Ethan tried a different approach later that afternoon. Claire, come on, he said while leaning against the doorway of the study. You made your point already. My point. Yeah, we were wrong, fine, but eviction is extreme. I stared at him in disbelief. Extreme. Not once had any of them considered their own behavior extreme when they planned to shove a 7-year-old into a dusty storage room. You hired a contractor to tear apart my daughter's bedroom. I reminded him. That was before we knew. Exactly, I interrupted. Before you knew the house belonged to me, you didn't care how we felt. He looked away because he knew I was right. Vanessa took the most dramatic route of all. 3 days later, she burst into tears during dinner. I'm pregnant, she sobbed loudly. How can you do this to a pregnant woman? I set down my fork slowly. You called my child spoiled in front of her. That's different, no, I replied calmly. It isn't. The table fell silent again. Even my father finally seemed defeated. Over the following weeks, the tension inside the house became unbearable. Cardboard boxes slowly appeared in the hallways. My parents argued constantly about money. Ethan scrambled to find an apartment he could actually afford. Vanessa complained every hour about how heartless I'd become. But something surprising happened during all that chaos. Lily started smiling again. Little by little, the fear disappeared from her face. One evening, I found her sitting cross-legged in her lavender bedroom, drawing pictures with crayons. What are you making? I asked softly. She grinned proudly. Our happy house. I sat beside her on the carpet. In the drawing, there were only 2 people inside the giant house. Me and her, no one else. That picture nearly broke my heart. Not because it was sad, because it was honest. Children always know where they feel unwanted. The final moving day arrived 30 days later under bright spring sunlight. My father carried the last suitcase to the car without saying much. My mother avoided looking at me entirely. Ethan muttered a quiet goodbye before climbing into his truck. Only Vanessa stopped in the driveway. She crossed her arms over her stomach bitterly. You know everyone's going to think you're cruel. I looked at her calmly. Maybe, I said, but my daughter will never again think she's unwanted in her own home. She had no response to that. An hour later, they were gone, just like that. The silence afterward felt strange at first, then peaceful. For the first time in years, the house could finally breathe again. That weekend, Lily and I redecorated her bedroom together. We painted one wall soft pink, bought glowing fairy lights, and filled the shelves with books and stuffed animals. I even let her choose ridiculous star-shaped pillows that she insisted were royal princess pillows. That night, she climbed into bed smiling wider than I'd seen in months. "Mommy," she whispered sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for saving my room." Tears burned my eyes instantly. I kissed her forehead gently. "I'll always protect you." And I meant it. Months passed. I later heard through relatives that Ethan and Vanessa were drowning in debt again. My parents moved into a tiny apartment across town and blamed me for destroying the family. But the truth was simpler than that. I didn't destroy the family. I simply stopped allowing them to destroy us. One rainy evening, I stood alone outside Lily's bedroom, watching her sleep peacefully beneath the fairy lights. The lavender walls glowed softly in the dark. Grandpa had once told me this house belonged to the strongest girl in the family. For years, I thought strength meant sacrifice, endurance, keeping everyone happy, but I understand now. Real strength is protecting the people who depend on you, even when it means standing against the people who raised you. And in the end, my sweetest revenge wasn't humiliating them, it wasn't throwing them out, it wasn't proving the house belonged to me. It was this: my daughter finally felt safe again, inside the home that had always been ours.